All right, so the Phoenix Suns just got eliminated. I'm surprised. I'm sure Phoenix Suns fans are surprised, disappointed at what happened, but I think there's some interesting things they can do. I actually think there's a lot they can do this off season. Let's talk about it. It's the Hoops Nerd Show. All right, guys, before we get into it, let's make sure and give a shout out to our sponsor, Prize Picks. If you haven't already, go to prizepicks.com, use promo code HoopsNerd. It supports the channel, and you'll have a lot of fun. Just bet the over on Devin Booker, and you will win easy money every time, honestly. So anyways, go sign up for Prize Picks. I would appreciate it. All right, let's talk about the Suns and some of the things that went on, and I want to just get right into it. Let's talk about their contract situation and what I think they need to do with their roster. All right, so looking here at Spot Track at the current contracts on their salary cap for next season. Before we dive into these, I just want to talk about Monty Williams, which I think is a conversation you have to have. Is he the right coach for this team? Because right now, the Phoenix Suns, and during this series with the Denver Nuggets, you saw it, this duo of Kevin Durant and Devin Booker is the best in the league. Just absolutely dominant guard-wing combo. They just had injuries to Chris Paul. They had Deandre Ayton not showing up, and we'll talk a little bit about him. And they need to fill in the roster. Now, the question is with Monty Williams, is he the coach that can get these guys over the top? It's difficult to say because of so many injuries. When you are having Cam Payne as your starting point guard, it's really, really hard to beat a team as good as the Denver Nuggets. You know, is he good enough offensively or defensively to really hold up like they need him to? And I don't think he's either of those things. You know, you have Landry Shamet playing. He had a big game. I think it was game 4 where he just was lights out from 3 and was a big part of that win. But every other game, what are you getting? You're not getting defense, and the shooting's just not good enough to sustain. So it was Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and then and Deandre Ayton, who seems like he's scared to play basketball at times, or does he even like basketball? I don't know if Monty Williams is the guy, but if I'm the Suns and you have a chance to go out there and get an elite head coach, this is a team a lot of coaches would be excited about because it's a team that's ready to win now, has 2 elite superstars, two top 10 players on this team, if not top 5. So you've got a situation where you might be able to go out and get an incredible coach. Is there someone like Nick Nurse that you might be interested in? Or maybe there's someone else. But that means moving on from Monty Williams, who it's hard to say because of all the injuries. Can you really blame Monty Williams? I don't know if he's an elite head coach, though, because I don't think we've ever seen a situation in the playoffs where he's really out-coached another coach. And I know they've dealt with injuries to Chris Paul the last 2 years, so maybe it's not his fault. But at the same time, you'd like to see him improve. All right, now, talking about the roster, we've mentioned it a little bit. You've got Kevin Durant and Devin Booker locked in next year. The question comes now with Chris Paul and Deandre Ayton. These are the two that really let this team down. Chris Paul because of injury, and Deandre Ayton because of just an absolute fart noise in the playoffs this year. I am just so out on Deandre Ayton. Let's talk about Deandre Ayton first. There was one play, I believe it was game 5, that just told me everything I needed to know about Deandre Ayton. He was in the post. Jokic was out. Jokic played most of the minutes of the game. So when Jokic is out of the game, you really you've got to get an advantage. You've got to gain ground on this Denver Nuggets team. And there was a point where he was in the post against Aaron Gordon, just kind of standing there, and the whole team was just watching, waiting to give him the ball in the post. And he doesn't fight his way. And after like 3 seconds of wanting to get Ayton the ball, they ended up having to move it somewhere else. And Booker, or I can't even remember who it was, Kevin Durant has to take a difficult shot, or you're having someone like Cam Payne take a shot. At that point, I was like, I'm out on Deandre Ayton. If I'm the Phoenix Suns, I do everything I can to move DeAndre's contract so I can find someone else. Because you know what was interesting about this series is that Jock Landale was the best center they had on this team. When he was on the floor, better things were happening. And it doesn't mean that Deandre Ayton doesn't have more potential, better physical tools, better talent, to be honest. It's just the mental aspect of it. It's just not there. I don't know if he loves basketball. I don't know if he's one of those guys that likes to fight. I don't know if he's a guy that is going to do everything he can to win a game. He enjoys getting his checks and going home. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if I'm wanting to win a championship, I don't know if that's the type of guy I want on my team. So I would trade Deandre Ayton. And I'm sure there's someone out there that would be willing to take him on because there is talent. And maybe there's another team that feels like Monty Williams didn't develop him enough or didn't get the most out of him. I have a hard time thinking a lot of teams are going to believe that, but we did see the Pacers try to sign him. He didn't even want to be on this Suns team. Maybe the Pacers would be willing to take him on. They're going to be trying to win next season. Maybe you can make some sort of trade for, you can move Deandre Ayton to the Pacers. Now, if there's no team out there, the Suns do have their own pick in 2024. So they can trade that if they want, I believe. I know although it may be difficult, they may have to wait till after this year because I don't believe in the CBA. Although we have a new CBA, so I don't know all the rules exactly. Let me know in the comments. But they do own their own pick in 2024. So there is a potential possibility that maybe they could use a pick to move off of his contract to open some cap space for other things to happen. Because what we saw in this series is if Jock Landale, who's making not that much, is your starting center and you can find a way to get a better guard playing for you, it might be worth it, And you can use that money to fill out that roster, get some depth, so you don't have Kevin Durant and Devin Booker both playing 42 to 45 minutes every game in the playoffs, because by the time this series was over, it felt like they were out of gas. So I would move DeAndre Ayton. If you can get anything of value, or if you can find some way to clear some cap space, to open some space up, to get some depth on this team, that is a massive win for this team. The other question is Chris Paul. And the biggest shame and the biggest thing that was so frustrating about this for Suns fans is, I believe it was game 2, the Suns were up. They were up by like 6 or 8 points or something like that. And then Chris Paul gets hurt again in the playoffs with a groin injury. And at this point where he's like 37 years old or whatever he is, it's difficult to foresee him not having these injuries again. Next season, he has a partial guarantee on his contract. So perhaps you're just looking at letting that fall off and going with Chris Paul, and then maybe finding something at trade deadline if you can. But if you can make some sort of move to bring someone in, maybe you can make a move with DeAndre Ayton and give some money to someone else. I think you have to think about it. Now, I think Chris Paul is great, and I think Chris Paul was something that really changed the Suns team. But I think at this point, with Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, that is the future. And you've got to look at moving Chris Paul if you can. If there's some team out there that's willing to do that, you have to look at that. Looking at different free agent possibilities here, there's some guys that they could think about. And the one that really sticks out to me is Fred VanVleet, who has a player option. If the Suns can find a way to clear some cap space and give a big time contract to Fred VanVleet and find some ways to fill out their roster and get some depth on this team by clearing DeAndre Ayton, clearing Chris Paul, and if you can get a contract to Fred VanVleet and then find some other players for depth, then I think they're in a really good spot, because you've got some guys on this team that are pretty solid, but they just need some shooting, they need some defense, and they need better depth. Now, there's some guys on this team I really like. Jock Landale, I felt like, was a really nice player for them. You found out in the playoffs that he was really solid. I feel like TJ Warren is a guy they can keep and that he can play. Josh Okogie, nice defender. Terrence Ross has his moments. He can shoot the ball. And look, the biggest thing with someone like Terrence Ross is the money. Can you fill out your roster with lower contracts? $1.8 million for TJ Warren, $580,000 for Terrence Ross. These veteran minimums are so valuable for a team like the Suns, who needs to be getting more depth. And so that's what I've got on the Suns. I think they have a roster that's ready to compete next year. I actually think they can retool next year in a quick way. With trading their 2024 pick, I think they can clear some cap space, maybe bring on someone like a Fred VanVleet that would fit perfectly with this team, some toughness, some defense. Can they get more defense and shooting? That's the hardest thing to do in the league. And by the way, you can always go out and get better centers. You can find centers on this market at low cost to fill this roster. I would rather have a low-cost center that's like 80% of what DeAndre Ayton is doing, who plays his heart out like a Jock Landale, than DeAndre Ayton making $30 million and giving you a B effort. That's what I want to see for this Suns team. I think they'll be really good next year. I would not be surprised if they're a title contender next year and going to the finals next year with that duo of Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. I think it's definitely possible. Guys, if you're new here, like and subscribe to the channel. Make sure you go to Prize Picks, use promo code HoopsNerd. I will talk to you next time.